It's quite beautiful. We might walk up behind there before we walk over to Trastevere shortly as well. Now you can see, what do you call this big tower here? Does anyone remember? Yeah, pretty close. It's from the Middle Ages. It's from like the 12th century, and it's never had to be restored, and the bells are still in there.
Wow.
And it's beautiful. Everything about medieval is just beautiful. The church itself, at a certain point, they stuck all sorts of Baroque stuff on it, and then they took it off again, which I'm quite grateful for. When we go in, you'll see immediately to your left, there's this big, very famous, it's called the Bocca della Verità. Has anyone seen Roman Holiday?
No.
There's this famous part where Audrey Hepburn, yeah, you know it? She puts her hand in, and the legend is that a liar will have their hand eaten off if they put it in there, and she's living a lie at the point she's going to remake. It's an awesome movie. And she puts her hand in, and he pretends like it's being... Oh no, he puts his hand in, and
I've seen that.
pretends like it's being eaten off. Anyway, so we'll see that, and you can put your hand in, and we'll find out who the truth sayers are here. So this is the Basilica of Santa Maria in Cosmedin, or it's also called Santa Maria de Schola Graeca. So the Greek school, Greek monks once lived here. It's a basilica. A basilica is a church that has a particular status given to it by the Pope, and quite often a basilica will have a special place where if the Pope comes to visit, that's where he would say Mass, and there might be a special cathedra, a chair for him as Bishop of Rome as he visits. So there are basilicas throughout the world. There in Rome there are 4 major basilicas. Do you know what they might be?
John Lateran.
Yeah.
And St.
Exactly. So San Pietro, so St. Peter's, Santa Maria Maggiore, which we'll see on Friday, St. Paul outside the walls, San Paolo,
And St. John Lateran.
and St. John Lateran. And if you look at a map, they actually form a cross with the Colosseum at the centre. So that's kind of cool. And there are 3 basilicas that we usually refer to as the minor basilicas in Rome. And they are Santa Croce in Gerusalemme, which we're hoping to get to, St. Lawrence outside the walls, St. Lorenzo, one of my absolute favourites. It's kind of over our side of town. It's about a 40-minute walk from the Domus. And then St. Sebastian outside the walls. But in fact, there are 61 minor basilicas in Rome.
Wow.
So it kind of gives you a scale. Not every church is a basilica, but there are 61 in Rome, right? So let's go back to around 6 BC. And, 6 BC. And this area of the city was basically the area where you had the marketplaces, and in particular the cattle market. And there were also lots of temples around. And Hercules was one of the major guys who was worshipped, and that's a temple right there. But they've also found remains of an altar made out of tufa. Remember we were in the catacombs yesterday? You know what tufa is like? So there was an altar that very low down that they found that they think was actually a place where they were worshipping Hercules as well. So we're at the cattle market, also called the Forum Boarium. So like a boar, right? Forum Boarium. And so there are lots of shrines and temples around to Hercules in this area. Then in the 4th century BC, there was a colonnaded loggia. So it's kind of like an open air marketplace that was on the site where you have Santa Maria in Cosmedin. And it may have been used for the Romans to distribute food to those who didn't have any. So it's kind of like a welfare service place. Or it could have still been the site for Sir Hercules, or it could have been both. And then in the 6th and 7th century, so going, I'm skipping ahead, no, I said BC before, it's AD, it becomes the Greek quarter. And you have Greek refugees, Syrian refugees, and Egyptian refugees coming into this area. And they were merchants and those also working for the government for Constantinople. So Mario will be able to tell you more about the context there. And it's during the Byzantine papacy of 537 to 752. So you've got Eastern refugees who are fleeing. They're fleeing from persecution. They're fleeing because the world, Islam is making a big impact, and people are fleeing from that. And there's also a huge iconoclastic controversy going on, and people are fleeing because of that as well. And they're coming around this area, so you can see this as the kind of refugee area of Rome. It becomes very important economically, and in fact, the Roman government says, you guys can look after yourselves. We're not actually going to have that much authority over the way that you operate. You're your own kind of economic entity at this point, which is quite significant as well. In 550 AD, they built a hall which was a deanery, but it had the name diaconia. So a deacon, the name for a deacon comes from that. Do you know what diaconia means? Yeah, but what does it actually mean?
Teaching?
To serve.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so deacons are there to serve. So remember, in the very early days of the church, the apostles realised that they didn't have enough time to both take care of the liturgy and take care of the needs of all of the people who were coming to them. And as Christians, we want to serve people. So they appointed deacons. And the deacons were very, very important. So remember, St. Lawrence was a deacon. We've heard about St. Lawrence. St. Stephen was also a deacon, the first martyr of the church. He was stoned to death. And there were people who were going out and doing the work of taking care of the poor. You don't have anything to eat? Let me help you. You don't have clothing? Let me help you. You've been thrown into prison unjustly? Let me help you. So welfare services really began at this point. This was kind of the Vinnies before the Vinnies of the church, right? So they built this church, and what's interesting is that that particular version of the church, the brickwork is not Roman brickwork. Remember, we've all been marvelling at Roman brickwork? It's more like from Napoli, and they think that it was probably built by southern Italians working with Greek builders at that point. It became a gathering place and a place of worship, but also a place of service to the community, and it was an early welfare centre run by the church and funded by the wealthy. And in the church you'll actually find that occasionally there are inscriptions naming people who gave money for that work of the church, not only for building the church, but also for serving the poor. Okay, so Pope Hadrian I in 780 rebuilt and extended the church, and when he did so, he demolished parts of an old temple. So kind of put back that way. And the Virgin Mary as Santa Maria de Schola Graeca. It has 3 apses inside, which is a very unusual kind of thing.
Triconch.
What's that, sorry?
Triconch.
Yeah, and it would be more of an Eastern thing to do, I believe. Is that right?
You'd eat underneath a triconch kind of thing in the Roman world, and it was appropriated.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's unusual for Rome, but we'll find that when we go inside. You'll also see the floor is one of my favourite. You're going to see a lot of this now. It's Cosmatesque flooring. The Cosmati brothers went around Rome. They had a good bit going. They took bits and pieces of, when you're lopping off marble and stone in order to make big things. You've got all of these little bits, and they managed to make gorgeous floors and candlesticks and all sorts of things. And you'll see the Cosmati floor. You'll also see it in Santa Maria in Trastevere, and you'll also find Spolia. Remember when we went in to the first part of the talk yesterday at the catacombs? There were all of these bits and pieces stuck in the wall. Spolia, so things that are like spoils. They've been taken when other things have been broken apart. In the 9th century, it became known as Santa Maria in Cosmedin, which means kind of an ornamented church. So Santa Maria of the beautiful stuff, which is ornamented. And then Nicholas I in 858, between 858 and 1867, built a sacristy, an oratory, and rooms for the papal residence. And then in 1084, when Rome was sacked, all of its surrounding area was burnt, but we still have Santa Maria, thankfully. In the 12th century, there was a renovation. The galleries were walled up, frescoes were put in, there's a new floor, new furnishings, including, you'll see it as a kind of canopy over a ciborium, it is, over the altar. And then there's also a bishop's something, I can't read my own writing, and there's an Easter candlestick and a wall enclosure. Okay, one of my favourite things in here is that the bishop's throne, that's what it is, that's what my handwriting said. The bishop's throne has an inscription on it which says Alphanus fieri Virgo Maria. Alphanus has made this for the Virgin Mary. So it's like his gift to Our Lady. And there's the tomb of this guy who contributed a lot to the church. And he, with Our Lady on the tomb and two popes on either side, two popes who had a lot to do with this church itself. Lots of inscriptions of donos. I've told you about the floors. You'll see there are some remaining frescoes. Some of them were painted over in the 1600s, probably by some horrible people, I don't know. But what you've got left are Daniel and Ezekiel, and also some scenes from the New Testament. And I think that that's it. You can find in here the relics of St Valentine.
Oh.
Yeah, we don't know if it's the St Valentine that we celebrate, but he was a martyr. And there are relics of St Valentine in here. And if we can get inside the sacristy, there is a mosaic from the old St Peter's in there, which is a mosaic of the Magi visiting our Lord when he was born in the stable. So you can see that as well. So what you'll find here is that it's obviously a church with a long history. It's really an ancient church, but you see in this church that over time the dedication to Our Lady has remained, but it's taken different forms based on whatever the architecture was of the time and whatever the best art was around. So the church has always been very good at that, taking the best kind of cutting edge technology and art and trying to make things glorious. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's just go in there and look around. You'll see that it's unusual because, I didn't mention this, there's an enclosure that was put in for the monks to sing. It's kind of like a choir, and that was put in quite late. It's a marble enclosure where there's the altar inside and then there's the Boarium up above. Yeah. Did you want to add anything? No? Okay. All right, so why don't we head on over. We'll spend a bit of time if you want to have a look at the great, Oceania space, where you can put your hand in if you want, and then we'll go inside and have a look around. And just keep an eye out.